Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, against the background of the government claiming that they'd like to do more to help struggling workers, but can't, I'd like to discuss another breaking story in the last few days of a £122 million contract that the government paid to a, well, Tory-linked company for £46 million worth of PPE that they didn't even use because they weren't fit for purpose. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So think about this. The government are claiming that they'd love to help struggling families, but they can't find the money in the public finances. Right? We've looked everywhere, we just can't see anything. And there is a sense in which people could believe it. Like they think of times on a personal level when they or someone they've known has gone through some tough times, money was tight, you had to make choices. Some things that you previously thought of as essentials had to fall by the wayside because you can't spend money you don't have. The government are trying to implant this notion into people's minds. The country is going through tough times and has to tighten its belt. Never mind that it seems to be the poorest who are doing the most tightening. But the image of the person falling on hard times is not quite accurate for this government. It would be more accurate to describe it as the friend who goes on 3 foreign holidays a year and then complains that they can't pay their round down the pub. Nowhere is this more clearly illustrated than in the VIP lane scandal for COVID PPE. On the onset of the pandemic, our health and social care services were left with too little PPE. This was known even before the pandemic. Documents emerged later showing that the government were urged to order more of a range of kit before we knew about the pandemic, just for normal use, but they refused. No, we need to save money, we're not buying PPE. So our shortages were not a case of being caught out by an event that nobody could have predicted, which is what the government try and say, but of deliberately ignoring advice and then being caught out by an event that the government had been predicting for at least 10 years. I remind you, for 10 years before the pandemic started, it was this government's number one threat to the nation. As far as they were concerned, the number one threat to the nation was a global pandemic. They were supposed to be ready for it. But given that we were in the situation we were in, mistakes were made, okay, we've got to deal with what we've got now. The correct decision was to call all available suppliers and order huge amounts of PPE. The actual response was, at first, confusing. British-based PPE suppliers, never mind abroad, were telling journalists that they were fulfilling orders for equipment around the world, including in Europe, but they weren't getting any requests from the UK. We'll absolutely prioritise the NHS, they said, if they give us a ring and ask for stuff, but they weren't doing. Why wouldn't we be buying from them, we asked. The government tried to say, well, we need to vet the companies very, very carefully. We've got to make sure we get what we want and that we get good value for money. But these suppliers were already providing equipment for the NHS. They'd already been vetted, surely. It was all very confusing. Then we started hearing stories of consignments of PPE coming into the country that were either out of date or weren't what was ordered. Sometimes both. So much for the vetting process. We were not getting the equipment we needed. Much later on, the main scandal broke in the news. Turned out the government saw an opportunity to steal a load of public money. They set up the so-called VIP lane for Tory donors and others with close personal links to the party and prioritised them for PPE contracts. Didn't matter if they were actual suppliers, didn't matter if they were capable of delivering on these contracts. Give them money, let them buy the stuff on the open market. How hard can it be? And this latest case was absolutely typical of what happened. So PPE MedPro, a company linked to a Tory politician, of course, was given a contract for medical gowns. The government paid this company £122 million for 25 million gowns. This is at a cost of about £5 per gown, of course, when you should be paying less than £1 even for a relatively small consignment. Like if you wanted to order just a relatively small amount, it costs you less than £1 a gown. In fact, MedPro bought the gowns for £46 million. Now, you can argue at the time prices were going up a bit because there was huge demand. So, okay, that might take account of the fact that maybe these gowns, even when you're buying a lot of them, could cost £46 million. Doesn't justify the government giving this company £122 million to buy the £46 million worth of gowns, though, does it? So straight away, very poor value for public money. The company was making a profit of 165%. Now, that is what I call a profit margin. And this sort of thing was happening with other companies and contracts as well. But it was worse than simply paying over the odds, because the gowns couldn't be used. They weren't fit for purpose. So it wasn't even that we paid £122 million for £46 million worth of kit. We paid £122 million for nothing at all. And also, actually, technically negative, because we'd have had to pay people to inspect the gowns and go, these are no good. And this is just one case. The cumulative effect of all these dodgy deals runs to billions. This is why we kept hearing stories in the news of PPE being delivered to hospitals that was out of date. You know, surgeons would remove the expiry date sticker to reveal the real one underneath, saying, oh, this has gone out of date a year ago. That's if it arrived at all. You know, it's why medics, for example, had to fashion their own PPE out of bin bags or reuse single-use PPE. It should come as no surprise that there was an absolute explosion of COVID amongst healthcare professionals and that they have been taking the brunt of long COVID cases. But it's even worse than that. So far we've spent a load of money on kit that wasn't usable, so therefore we've spent a load of money on nothing. You know, this move risked people's health because the money was for healthcare equipment. In fact, on such a large scale did this corruption take place that it absolutely must have cost people lives. As far as I'm concerned, what is the difference between this and corporate manslaughter? And the government are largely responsible. But you don't get the goods as ordered, so you claw back the money. The Department for Health and Social Care are reported to be trying to recover the money, but MedPro say, no mate, we're not giving you the money back and we don't have to because the gowns were approved by agents from the Department for Health and Social Care. Now, if this is true, this doesn't just represent the Tory government giving Tory mates a load of money to buy PPE at vastly inflated prices to keep a load of profit, but also making sure that they are effectively indemnified from any consequences of not actually fulfilling the contract. It's basically the government saying, look, we'll give you a load of money to buy this stuff. We know that you're not actually have any experience at buying this stuff, so we'll give you well over the odds to make sure that you definitely make a nice slice of profit. But also, if you don't manage to get us the goods, you can still keep the money. For all the talk of Russia's kleptocracy, this is exactly what we have going in the UK. It's sometimes more subtle, you know, like selling off our national assets to the private sector. Sometimes it's blatant, as the VIP lane was, even though they tried to cover it up. But it's too audacious a heist on the UK Treasury to hide forever. And it was a heist. Bear in mind that the person who was in charge of dealing with the contracts is married to the person who deals with the issues of corruption. So it's literally the case of if you have a problem with the person who was sort of running COVID affairs, Dido Harding, and you say, I think we've got some corruption here. She would go, no problem. You send a letter to our anti-corruption guy, who happened to be her husband. You know, you couldn't create a conflict of interest that big by accident. It was all deliberate. The government deliberately put countless lives at risk and allowed a much greater spread of the disease than was necessary. Not because their political philosophy wasn't perhaps the best to cope with the pandemic. There was an element of that. But in this case, because of sheer naked criminal greed. And then we come back to the economic situation right now. The government are presiding over the poorest in the country having to switch off the lights and only buy food that doesn't need cooking because the cost of energy is exceeding their income. People who can't eat anything on all days, you know, whether it needs energy to cook or not, there's just some days they have to do without food. The government say there's nothing they can do about this. There isn't the money to do more than they're already doing. But there was money to give a Tory peers company £122 million for £46 million worth of equipment and then not even get the money back when they didn't even get that equipment. And the same for lots of other companies as well. As I say, we're talking billions that were just given to people. Those billions would have gone a lot further if they'd spent the same money on keeping bills lower. So when the government try to say that they'd like to help but they can't, don't picture them as presiding over a country that's fallen on hard times, even though that is believable when you've had 12 years of Tory rule. See them as someone complaining about not being able to pay for the essentials while they're throwing large sums of money at luxuries. A country that is really struggling to help keep the cost of living down would not be handing over large sums of money to people for nothing in return. And as a final point, and I'm likely to bring this up again in the future, Conservatives in areas getting ready for the local elections are currently trying to persuade locals that the government are doing all they can. It's what they have to do because Sunak has delivered an absolute stinker of a budget statement, but they want to win. And the Conservatives might still win some council seats. Forgetting, so they're basically saying, look, yeah, we're helping as much as we can, but ultimately, if you want to be able to pay the bills, work is the way out on this. Forgetting that it's working people who are being crushed just like the unemployed. But they keep up with this narrative of, yeah, but if you vote Labour, that'll just mean giving all our money to the unemployed. But actually, no, this is what the Conservatives do. They've given billions of pounds to the idle rich. These are the unemployed who are actually getting all our money. The millionaire Tory scroungers who then have the nerve to insist that people who can't even afford to light their homes, even if in full-time work, should just put more effort in. Try a bit harder. I put no effort at all and the government gave me 100 million quid. So therefore, it must be that you're really lazy if you can't even afford to turn the lights on. People should think on that. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.